All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going on a highly focused journey to totally demystify some of the core principles of how our world actually operates. We'll be drawing directly from Thomas Sowell's renowned work, Basic Economics, transforming that material into a definitive key concepts guide. Look, if you've ever felt intimidated by economic theory, don't worry, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to strip away the complex equations, toss out the dense mathematical jargon, and strictly focus on the core logic of how societies function. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have an incredibly clear, practical framework for understanding the hidden forces that shape our daily lives.
Okay, so before we get into the weeds, we've got to bust a major myth and totally reframe what this subject actually is. The common assumption is that economics is basically just the study of money, banking, or corporate finance, right? But Sowell presents a much more fundamental reality. Economics is really about the allocation of scarce resources that have alternative uses. It's not just about printing money, it's about how we as a society decide where limited materials, time, and human effort should actually go when there are literally countless different ways we could use them.
To get a firm grip on all of this, here's our game plan for today. We're going to define scarcity and the market, look at the vital role of prices as signals, and then apply this to the real world by examining price ceilings with rent and price floors with wages. Finally, we'll explore the dangers of market intervention and wrap up with the ultimate clash between economics and politics.
Let's start with Part 1, Introduction, Scarcity and the Market.
So, what are we really talking about here? Well, the absolute crucial point is scarcity. Scarcity is simply the condition where there is never enough of something to fully satisfy everyone who wants it. And we aren't just talking about rare diamonds or luxury sports cars here. This applies to land, to medical care, food, and even human labor. Scarcity is just the natural state of the world. It's the fundamental problem that literally any economic system, whether you're talking about a capitalist one, a socialist one, or anything in between, is attempting to solve. Since we obviously can't have everything, how do we choose who gets what? Moving on to Part 2, Prices as Signals. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Sowell uses this incredible analogy, arguing that prices are not just arbitrary obstacles set up by greedy corporations to take your money. Instead, they actually act as economic traffic signals. Just consider how this flows. Say in Step 1, a resource suddenly becomes scarce. Maybe a massive drought hits a wheat crop. Instantly, in Step 2, the price of wheat rises. Now, this isn't just a math change, it's a vital transmission of information across the entire globe. And then in Step 3, this signal creates immediate incentives. Consumers see that high price and naturally seek cheaper alternatives, which conserves the scarce wheat. At the exact same time, producers see the high price as a reward, which heavily incentivizes them to plant more wheat. So without any central planner dictating what to do, the price signal naturally guides society to adapt to that scarcity.
All right. Let's see how this applies to the real world in Part 3, Price Ceilings, Rent.
So, according to Sowell's analysis, when a government steps in to implement rent control, it is essentially setting an artificial maximum limit on the price of housing. Now, while the intention behind this might absolutely be to keep housing affordable for people, the source text argues that this policy effectively destroys those vital market signals we just talked about. Because the price is artificially capped, consumers have no real incentive to conserve space. But more importantly, builders and landlords lose the financial incentive to construct new buildings or even maintain existing ones simply because it's no longer profitable. The result, Sowell argues, isn't affordable abundance, but an artificial housing shortage. Basically, the traffic signal has been broken.
Next up, Part 4, Price Floors, Wages. Let's flip the scenario. Just as rent control acts as a price ceiling, Sowell outlines that a minimum wage acts as a price floor, an artificial minimum price set for labor. The text argues that a worker's true wage is inherently determined by their productivity and the actual value they add to the process. So, when a government mandates a wage that ends up exceeding the actual market value of that labor, employers naturally just purchase less of it. They might decide to automate certain tasks or simply hire fewer people overall. And because that artificial price attracts way more people looking for work than employers are actually willing to hire at that inflated rate, it generates a surplus of labor. In economic terms, this surplus of labor is simply what we call unemployment.
When you put these concepts side by side, it brilliantly illustrates the symmetrical relationship of market interventions. When you enforce a price ceiling, like rent control, you guarantee a shortage because demand outpaces supply at that artificial price. On the flip side, when you enforce a price floor, like a minimum wage, you guarantee a surplus, unemployment, because supply outpaces demand at that artificial price. The underlying lesson from the source material is pretty clear here. Altering the natural traffic signals of the market always guarantees a specific, measurable disruption in how resources are allocated.
Which brings us to Part 5, the danger of intervening.
Everything we just discussed feeds directly into what Sowell calls the law of unintended consequences. As highlighted in the text, there is this recurring theme in history where economic policies are judged primarily by their noble intentions, like genuinely wanting to help the poor or make housing more affordable, rather than by their actual real-world outcomes. The text argues that these well-intentioned interventions frequently create severe unintended consequences. We're talking about massive inflation, the creation of shady black markets, or drastically reduced quality of goods. It's a really powerful reminder that in the realm of economics, good intentions absolutely do not equal good results.
Now, to be completely clear here, it is vital to note that Sowell is not advocating for zero government. He isn't pushing for anarchy. Instead, he outlines legitimate, highly necessary functions for the state. According to him, the government's role is to protect property rights, rigorously enforce contracts, and maintain general law and order. Essentially, the state is supposed to build a safe, secure, and predictable framework. It should act as an impartial referee so that the free market can function effectively and safely for everyone.
Finally, let's look at Part 6, Economics versus Politics.
The text makes a really sharp critique of political incentives, pointing out something we can call the myopia of electoral cycles. Think about it. Economics is not static. Decisions made today have long-term consequences that require serious planning and risk management. However, politicians operate on very short-term electoral cycles, usually just 2 to 4 years. According to Sowell, this means politicians are structurally incentivized to implement policies that offer immediate, highly visible benefits to voters right now, even if those exact same policies cause severe economic damage in the long run, long after the election is over.
There's this quote from the text that just perfectly nails this friction. Sowell writes, "The first lesson of economics is scarcity. There is never enough of anything to fully satisfy all those who want it. The first lesson of politics is to disregard the first lesson of economics." I mean, wow, that perfectly encapsulates the fundamental clash we've been exploring. Economics is strictly constrained by the natural laws of scarcity and resource allocation. Politics, on the other hand, is heavily driven by the desire to promise people whatever they want to hear. Understanding this massive disconnect is the ultimate key to seeing the world through an economic lens. So, we've unpacked the reality of scarcity, we've seen how prices act as vital traffic signals, and we've explored exactly how artificial price controls, like rent limits and minimum wages, can trigger shortages and surpluses. Now, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. Think about a recent government policy in your own city or country. Regardless of the political party that proposed it, how can you analyze that policy through this lens of unintended consequences? Are the natural market signals being altered? And what is the actual outcome likely to be? Entirely separate from the good intentions. Keep questioning, keep using these core concepts to decode the news, and thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.